time to Mr. Nico Kleynhans.
Good morning to you and also to the listeners. How old should you be when you first start financial planning? That is really the question I want to answer. And the trigger has come by my nieces who want stuff, a lot more than their pocket money can afford. And just casually, in talking amongst the grown-ups the other night, I heard how much they were wanting, and I then heard what they're going to do about getting there. And so I took down a walk down memory lane to when I was a teenager about 4,000 years ago. Now, as a young lad, I had two interests. I loved science and I was fascinated by finance and money. Those were my two interests. Now, on the science front, I loved working with chemicals and I loved understanding what happens when you mix chemicals. And I discovered that certain chemicals, when mixed, made wonderful explosives. And I was fascinated by these explosives. And one particular experiment produced a powder that was so sensitive that even if an insect landed on it, it would explode. This was, for me, fascinating. And so I would go to my bedroom, close the door, and mix these chemicals because I knew my parents would get hysterical if they discovered what I was doing. And one afternoon, I decided I would mix a whole supply, enough for a whole week. And as I was drying the stuff on blotting paper and getting ready to move it, the entire sheet exploded in one loud bang. Now, the first thing was I felt dazed. I was completely deaf by the noise, and my door burst open and in charged my mother. I was glad that I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the speed with which her lips were moving, I knew she was not wishing me a happy afternoon. And the speed with which her arms were moving, I knew this was not going to end up well. My dad also charged in because he was on night shift and he was trying to get some sleep. And he also charged in. I was not able to explain that I needed to make this kind of gunpowder because I could sell it at school and I could then make some pocket money from the result. I thought it's best not to go down that particular route. But I did want to know more about finance, and I knew that my pocket money was not adequate. So what I did was I went to the Barclays Bank manager because those days Barclays Bank was the bank you went to. Today we call it First National Bank. And so at 13 years old, I made an appointment with the manager. And I sat down and said, I need to learn about money and I need to learn about budgeting. And I explained to him, my dad only gives me 20 cents per week. And that's all he can afford for pocket money. And I need a lot more money than 20 cents a week. I knew I needed more money, and I knew that I had to earn that money in some way. I explained I tried to make explosives, and that wasn't going to work very well, so I needed to find a different way. And as he and I spoke, I mentioned that I was a nerd and I collected knowledge. And when I went home, I thought about it further. And then I thought, well, there's a radio program called Test the Team. And this program has got three very clever blokes on it. And if you wrote in a question to Test the Team and they couldn't answer the question, they would send you 10 rand. And 10 rand was more pocket money than I earned in a year. So I went to the library, looked at what I could find in the encyclopedia that would be interesting and decided, no, this wasn't going to work. Went back to the radio program and listened for which questions the team seemed to struggle with. And they struggled with American geography and American history. So back to the encyclopedias, and I began to send in questions. And I think I won about 40 rand altogether, which meant that in 1 year, I was able to get enough pocket money for me to buy all the pets I wanted, to keep them happily fed, and also to meet my goals. The other thing I learned as a young lad was that I was certainly going to go into business at some point. And to save money, I would go to the library and I would read about shares, stocks, and I set up a play portfolio. And I remember that when Liberty Life launched their shares, I on paper bought shares and I began to track how much money I would have made had I had sufficient capital to buy. So the lessons I learned and the lessons that my clients learn and the lessons I'm hoping you will learn and the lessons I'm hoping your teenagers will learn is that if you want to learn about financial planning, you have to start off with a budget. And the budget is the target of what amount you are wanting to achieve, whether that be as a monthly income, whether that be as a goal. What is it you want to achieve? If you don't know the target, how are you going to congratulate yourself when you get there? The second thing you need to understand is that very seldom are you going to achieve that with only one project. You're going to need more projects. So in my case, my dad was a contributing factor towards my goals, but I recognized that Test the Team was going to be one of the projects. I also thought at one point that making explosives and bombs was going to be one of my projects. And so that one I had to discard. And so when you're looking at your income streams, you probably are going to find 3 or 4 possible streams. They're not all going to work. It's fine if one doesn't work, but you need to have more than one income stream. So even if you're 45 and you're now looking at income streams, look at different income streams. Feel free to discard those that don't work and enjoy those that can. And then the last thing is, not every plan go out. Have an emergency fund. In my case, when I won that 40 rand, I was able to lend my mom pocket money. Emergency funds are helpful because that means when you do run out of capital or when the wheels come off, you've got something to fall back on and you don't end up feeling defeated then because your plan didn't come together. Emergency funds are critical. I hope you have fun when you start working with financial planning as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. And for those who maybe are saying, but where do I begin when it comes to budgeting? We've covered that in a previous series. So you can very easily just go onto our YouTube channel or onto our Facebook and just go and search for budgeting and you'll find the details
And
there.
also the good news is I have made the decision in the last week to update some booklets that I've written in the past 20 years because the technology has changed. So hopefully within 3 or 4 months, we will tell you how to have access to that stuff.